Kingdom Hearts 3 was good, like really good. Actually, hold on, this whole setup doesn't really feel right. Let me try something else. Okay, so as of the recording of this video, Kingdom Hearts 3 has officially been out for close to 2 years now. Man, how time flies. The Remind DLC from last year has come and gone, and now people finally have the complete package that they have waited all of their lives for. And much like any piece of media that exists on the internet, people have opinions about it. I will admit, I definitely find myself more in the camp that wholeheartedly loves this game, flaws and all, as it ended this near 2-decade-long story quite strongly in my opinion. That being said, I do think it still had the potential to be even stronger. Thus, like many of my peers, I too began pondering the million-dollar question. If I had the opportunity to rewrite Kingdom Hearts 3, how would I do it? Granted, several other people have already beat me to the punch on this topic. Sky. But as an amateur screenwriter, I thought it would still be a fun writing exercise to go through Kingdom Hearts 3, highlight some aspects of the game that I might have done differently, and see if I could craft an even more satisfying conclusion to the Dark Seeker saga. Now, I should probably mention a couple disclaimers before we get started. If I didn't make it clear before, Kingdom Hearts 3 is one of my favorite games in the series, second only to Kingdom Hearts 2 Final Mix. And if I'm being completely honest, if Square and Tetsuya Nomura had never touched the base game again for any other reason than, say, patching some of the gameplay, seriously, that glitch with blocking was absolutely nonsense, guys, I'd still be more or less satisfied with the final product that a Saga team gave us. With that said, I'm not oblivious to the problems that people have raised with the base game, and I'm gonna try and address them the best I can, while keeping a lot of Nomura's original vision intact. This is going to be a play-by-play outline of the story, some sections even right down to the dialogue, but this isn't going to be a total overhauling of the game's story. Like I said before, many of my peers on this site have already made excellent videos in that style if that's what you're looking for. Also, some of them I just highly recommend because they got some godly ideas in them, just straight fire! So, with that in mind, I gave myself only one major limitation with this rewrite. I cannot and will not be altering the game's overall story structure. What do I mean by this? Basically how the series of events of the game's narrative are laid out, as shown on the screen now, will for the most part remain consistently intact. Instead of totally rewriting major aspects of the story, we'll just be doing an elaborate script doctoring of what we already have. Certain scenes and characters may get moved around for better pacing, presentation, or just because they suit the story better, but the overall foundation will remain the same, ensuring the game's beginning, middle, and end stay consistent with the original version, just how we get to the end will hopefully be a little bit more satisfying for some people. So, with all of that said, here are 3 major aspects of Kingdom Hearts 3 that are going to be the focus of this rewrite. Number 1. Flesh out Sora's character arc. Contrary to what a lot of people will tell you, Sora actually does have a character arc in Kingdom Hearts 3, that being his inability to accept his role as the hero, that everything going down hinges on him stepping up and accepting his destiny as the key that connects everything. Throughout the entire game, everyone has big expectations of him, and added with the weakness he feels from failing his mark of mastery, he feels as though if he fails, he has no purpose left. That's a really fascinating angle to take this specific character in. The problem is that Kingdom Hearts 3 doesn't explore this enough, and as such, on the surface at least, Sora feels like he's just gliding through the story with no clear direction. So, for this rewrite, we'll try and bring this to the forefront and give Sora a more personal conflict to overcome and strive toward. Number 2. Strengthen Master Xehanort's role in the story and his connection to Sora. Xehanort's limited screen time, I feel, was kind of inevitable, with the unfortunate passing of both his Japanese and English voice actors, Chikao Atsuka and Leonard Nimoy respectively, back in 2015. May they both rest in peace. However, with this being the conclusion to Xehanort's story, it doesn't make much sense for him to be almost completely absent from the mass majority of the game up until the final battle. So, we're gonna cherry pick some scenarios in which the old goat man can make a more significant splash to make this feel like the proper swan song that he deserves. As for his connection to Sora, this is more a fault of the series as a whole that I don't think was fully rectified. I mean, really think about it. Despite being the main protagonist and antagonist respectively, Sora and Xehanort have almost very little to do with each other, aside from Sora being a small pest in Xehanort's way, and Xehanort being the big bad that Sora, as the protagonist, naturally has to defeat. There are personal connections between these two characters, but Kingdom Hearts 3 really should have hammered home the bonds that these two have, and that their goals and ideals have been leading to their eventual clash. So for this rewrite, we're going to make these connections a bit more prominent so that their conflict has a bit more meaning behind it. And finally, number 3, give Riku and Kairi more to do. How is it that the two most important characters in Sora's story get the short end of the stick when it comes to character development in Kingdom Hearts 3? I mean, I kinda get it in Riku's situation, as you could argue his arc up to this point has more or less concluded with Dream Drop Distance, but in Kairi's case, there is absolutely no excuse. I feel there's a way to both advance and conclude both of their arcs in a meaningful way, and all it will take, to borrow from Nando v Movies, is one major change, but we'll get to that eventually. Now, obviously, this entire process will not be perfect, and as fan discourse in any community has shown us, not everyone will agree with some of these story decisions. But with enough doctoring, I'm pretty confident that we can come up with something fun and worthy of ending this story with the gusto it deserves. And be good enough that I won't be torn apart in Twitter threads talking about how I'm a total hack. You're a hack! So, with that said, get cozy, grab your controller of choice, and let's begin rewriting Kingdom Hearts 3. Okay, so we're going to start making changes right off the bat by cutting this dive to the heart section. We're already going to get one later in the game, and its placement here just doesn't really serve any significance outside of, well, it's been in every other numbered title, so it's gotta be here too. Instead, we begin the game with our opening Skrillex AMV and then place the Scala Kylum flashback after that sequence instead of before. We get something of an abridged version of young Ericus and Xehanort's chess game with some of the same dialogue beats about the Lost Masters and all that. Here's where things get interesting. Xehanort is about to play one of 3 chess pieces when we, the player, are asked, "What power do you seek?" Those 3 chess pieces have names: the Warrior, the Guardian, and the Mystic. Whichever one the player chooses for Xehanort to play will determine your starting stats like past numbered games. As their game ends in a stalemate, with Xehanort probably having 13 pieces left and Ericus having 7 because Ericus suggests heading out to the docks to watch the sunset. The eager young lad takes off as Xehanort lounges behind. This not only helps draw a parallel between the two boys and Sora and Riku, but it also allows time for the player to take control of our tutorial character, that character being, unsurprisingly, young Xehanort. Yeah, the conclusion to the Xehanort saga has you playing as Xehanort, go figure. To me, a big strength that Kingdom Hearts 3 had was using Scala Xehanort to show that this character used to have a sense of innocence similar to our heroes, making his obsessions later in life all the more tragic. By putting us directly in Scala Nort's shoes for the tutorial, this allows the player to connect with the character on an even more personal level. Anyway, as young Xehanort, you can explore a small chunk of Scala at Kylum to get familiar with the controls. Free running on rooftops, basic combat against crates and training dummies, you know, the usual. After wandering around, Xehanort will be the first person to make it to the docks. We could get a shot that mimics this one from Birth by Sleep, as Ericus finally joins him, complaining how Xehanort got there so fast. The two take a seat to talk, and we learn here that Ericus is up for his Mark of Mastery, and he's feeling a bit nervous about it. We can also be vague about whether Xehanort already passed his, or if it even interests him considering his later pursuits. Either way, Xehanort tells Ericus that no matter what happens, he'll always have his brothers back, no matter what, to which Ericus responds that he'd do the same. And as the two friends watch the sunset, the camera dollies in on Xehanort's currently silver eyes, before we match cut to a pair of blue eyes, pulling out to reveal Sora. We're now back at the end of 0.2. This single cut now links Sora and Xehanort's connection for the remainder of the story, that Sora and Xehanort's destinies have been leading to this moment. The scene then goes on with Yensid explaining that Sora should find the power of waking, and we're finally thrust into Nomura, you crazy madman, you. So 2.9 is where we start making major changes to the story, but not with Sora actually. His adventure in Olympus goes by mostly unchanged. The only major alteration we're making with him here is with his confrontation with Maleficent and Pete. I know people would rather they just be cut altogether, but I think they can serve a legitimate purpose, but we'll get to that later. Same as before, they're just passing through and trade words with Sora, Donald, and Goofy. Pete calls Sora weak sauce, and the two of them bounce. However, Pete's comments do get under Sora's skin a bit, but he claims that it doesn't bother him, leaving Donald and Goofy none the wiser. Also, later when they fight the Rock Titan, Sora does not summon the Big Thunder Mountain ride to defeat this boss. Instead, this fight focuses more on the free running and flow motion mechanics to make this fight more functional than spectacle. We're not cutting attraction flow entirely, in fact this particular attraction is actually being moved to a later fight, but it is being restructured to work for certain battles instead of being an active gameplay mechanic. Because man, those situation commands look pretty plentiful, so definitely less is more in this case. Anyway, other than that, Olympus wraps up, and Sora learns from Herc what to fight for.
Well, you've got heart, Sora. Just keep at it, and I know you'll be stronger than ever.
Yeah, I might even end up stronger than you are.
There he goes again.
Okay, time for that big change. Let's jump to the Dark World. We cut to the depths of darkness, like before, and see three figures walking around. Those, of course, being King Mickey, Riku, and Kairi. Here we go. As much as I love Kingdom Hearts 3, I will be the first person to acknowledge that Kairi's character was incredibly mishandled, with all the signs of the previous games leading us in a different direction than what we got. So, to help rectify this, we're going to make a quick alteration to 0.2. I know, technically this is cheating, but humor me for a quick sec. Kairi wants to jump headfirst into fighting the good fight, even though Yensid cautions her that said fight will be tough and she can't charge in guns blazing without the proper training. That's when Riku, now a Keyblade master, offers to take Kairi under his wing to train her as his apprentice. This simple change effectively does two things. One, it gives Kairi more agency in the story, and two, it gives her more time to spend with Riku. Yeah, I'm not sure if anyone noticed the severe lack of screen time the two spend together, considering they're supposed to be best friends and haven't shared the screen in a more significant way since, what, Kingdom Hearts 2? Making this change also does something extra important for both characters, but we'll come back to that shortly. Anyway, the three of them are looking for Aqua. Riku has his talk about how far he's come, and Kairi shares the sentiment, excited that she finally gets to do something after being left behind all the time. They make it to the Dark Shore, and the fight with the Demon Tower still happens. This time, however, you're playing as Kairi with Riku and Mickey as your party members. Kairi doesn't deal as much damage as her party, but she holds her own in the fight. That being said, this is still a scripted fight. Whether you win or lose, Kairi will get knocked on her back foot and is left at the mercy of the Demon Tower. Riku, who's been trying to be more optimistic like Sora, tries to push on so that they can find Aqua, but the trio are clearly way in over their head. Before Kairi in particular can be annihilated, Mickey steps in and hits the Demon Tower with a Mega Flare, blowing it to smithereens and saving Kairi. Due to the close proximity of the blast, however, the Kingdom Key D is effectively busted, rusting at the blade and leaving Mickey physically drained. Realizing that they're outmatched and need to recharge, Riku leads the three of them out of there, hoping to return when they're healed. Notice how I didn't mention Riku's Keyblade breaking. That's because it doesn't, at least not here. We're gonna beef up this moment later on because something as big as a Keyblade snapping in half, especially one as important to Riku as Way to the Dawn, should leave at least a little bit of an impact instead of just, well, minor inconvenience. Bruh. Back at the mysterious tower, Sora, Donald, and Goofy debrief with Yensid. The scene continues as it normally does, with everyone clowning on Sora, and while he's joking it off, we still get signs that these comments are getting to him. Not awfully right now, but it's getting there. The scene then ends with Mickey telling Yensid about his busted Keyblade and what to do, and Yensid proposes an idea, summoning the Star Seeker Keyblade. He places it on the table, and after some magical nonsense, I don't know, you can put whatever you want here, Mickey's new Keyblade, the Kingdom Key S, is formed. Yes, I know it's technically called the Star Cluster, but I want to keep it consistent with the Kingdom Key design, so we're calling it the Kingdom Key S. It's one thing to have Riku and Mickey shrug off their Keyblades getting broken, which, last I checked, was a big deal, but it's another to have them get new Keyblades after the fact with no true explanation. Here, we're hitting two birds with one stone. Well, three, actually. We're giving the Kingdom Key D being broken the weight it deserves, we're given an explanation of its new design, and this gives an in-universe explanation for Keyblade forging. This is a new mechanic that was introduced with almost no fanfare, so why not give it a proper introduction? Speaking of which, when Sora receives his new clothes, this time maybe with a proper suiting up montage a la Kingdom Hearts 2, when Yensid gives Sora the heart binder, he also mentions the strength that Sora's heart has, and the potential power that his joy and happiness can achieve when focusing it. This gives us the in-universe explanation for attraction flow, which I mentioned earlier will be covered differently. Anyway, that's the scene in a nutshell, but to expand a bit further, we notice that Riku and Kairi are a little unhappy, to say the least. It's not outwardly talked about, but their description of their time in the Realm of Darkness has a bit of a bitter tone to it. Riku, in his overconfidence and newfound optimism, put everyone in danger, and Kairi, in her first outing as a legitimate Keyblade wielder, got her ass handed to her and almost died because of it. What's happening here is that this new dynamic and scenario has done something that I'm surprised Kingdom Hearts 3 didn't capitalize on, giving Riku and Kairi character arcs. In Dream Drop Distance, Riku being declared a Keyblade Master sounds like a natural conclusion to his character arc. However, I realized that we could expand on this more by showing how he deals with this new role and what kind of conflict he can overcome. If he gets someone like Kairi or Mickey hurt under his watch, he now feels like he's slipping under his new role, making him question whether he's making the right choices. This could even reflect Aqua's arc in Birth by Sleep when she becomes a master, which will make their confrontation later extra powerful, but we'll get to that. For Kairi, this is a different kind of growth. For too long, she's been placed on the sidelines with no true way of getting involved, and now that she's being put on the front lines and messing up in her first mission, this would irritate the hell out of her. This would be driving her for the rest of the story to become stronger like her friends, with her goal ultimately to never lose a fight again. Pretty sure you can imagine how this arc will be fulfilled. Our two respective groups have their missions. We get a Gummy Phone intro with the Enzo, maybe without so many references to Castle Oblivion because Sora never met Sexion. And we are officially out of the prologue and into... God, that gives me goosebumps every time. Just like 2.9, the Twilight Town segment doesn't have a lot of major changes aside from a few key moments. For example, the fight with the Demon Tide is now our first use of attraction flow with the Big Thunder Mountain ride. Fighting this normally in the crowded Twilight Town train common was a migraine and a half to deal with, so instead of moving around this map to fight this large Heartless, we're going to be above the action in a scripted sequence that gets us through this set piece quicker. Afterwards, we meet up with Hayner, Pence, and Olette, and we also briefly run into Merlin. He informs us about Lee's training while also telling us about how the 100-Acre Wood book has gone missing again, with Sora, Donald, and Goofy telling him that they'll find it. The rest of the world then goes by as it normally does. We run into Remy for some hijinks, or Little Chef, whatever you want to call him. Hayner, Pence, and Olette help get Dad Twilight Town up and running in the old mansion. And we run into Ansem, Seeker of Darkness, and Xemnas, who tell us that resurrecting Roxas is a dumb idea. Sora throws some usual sass at them, but then a third figure enters the scene. Young Xehanort. Sora mentions how he remembers him from the Dream Worlds, and young Xehanort basically informs Sora that their fight is not to take place right now, and that the organization is currently scouting the worlds for research, and that the trio interfering would lead to dire consequences. Sora promptly tells him to shove it, but to prove his point, young Xehanort pulls out the 100-Acre Wood book. Sora gasps, and with a quick smirk and snap of his fingers, young Xehanort casts Firaga on the book, burning 100-Acre Wood. Yeah, I know, HMK made a video about this scenario a few years back, and it was just too raw not to find a place to include it. The book evaporates, Heartless and Nobodies appear, and the three Norts vanish. After fighting off the dark forces, Sora is pissed and upset that he let this happen to his friends, further driving home his feelings of not being strong enough to save the people that he cares about. However, Donald and Goofy notice that the book still has a small fragment left over. They take it to Merlin, who tells them that the book can still be salvaged should they find the 6 other fragments and bring it to him to unlock them. And thus, our tradition of searching for the torn pages continues. The 6 other book fragments will be hidden throughout the other Disney worlds, with Sora, Donald, and Goofy having to find them. You can then take them back to Twilight Town, where Merlin will unlock the fragments, granting Sora a puzzle-based minigame and story segment based on the character who represents that fragment. The first one from Twilight Town being Pooh Bear, obviously, Toy Box being Tigger, the Tangled World being Rabbit, Monstropolis being Piglet, Arendelle being Eeyore, Port Royal being Owl, and San Francisco being Roo and Lumpy. Also, like past entries, this world is 100% optional, but the storyline within the book stays relatively the same as what we got in the original game, because it furthers the idea of Sora growing up and growing apart, and it can help benefit his character arc of failure, so it should not be touched in any way. Now, back to young Xehanort's appearance and him subsequently presenting this side quest. This also gives us another firm story-based reason for Sora, Donald, and Goofy to go through the Disney worlds again, besides just helping Sora unlock the power of waking. Now knowing that the organization has ulterior motives among the worlds, the trio realize that they gotta safeguard some places to stall their foes. Or in other words, lock some keyholes to keep the darkness out. It's a classic adventure again, and the boys are super excited to get started. The The rest of the world goes by as it normally does, with Sora and the gang meeting Scrooge McDuck and getting the intro to cooking with Little Chef, and Hayner and Olette introducing the Classic Kingdom minigames. Then, meanwhile on high, our three Norts watch the heroes begin their quest. Ansem and Xemnas promptly question whether revealing their plans to Sora was a good idea, but young Xehanort assures them that everything is going according to plan. Hey guys, what is going on? Devin here. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. Thank you so much for checking out today's video. This was a lot of hard work to put together, but I'm really proud of how it turned out. Both parts 2 and 3 are in production right now. They might take a little bit of some extra time, but I should definitely have those out for you guys in the coming months. If you want to stay up to date on this series, then please subscribe to the channel as well as hit the bell to get all notifications because YouTube has no idea what it's doing anymore. And also like the video, comment below what you thought about it, as well as share it around with all your friends. And be sure to follow Shadow Shoveler Productions on both Twitter and Instagram for more on yours truly. And until next time, I'd say that's about it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Evo's out.